Welcome to our YouTube channel, Living in the Chicagoland Suburbs. Today's topic is going to be getting a realtor for your buying project. Agents aren't necessarily vetted by their clients. The same should happen with your buyer's agent as well. You need to get someone that's either referred to you by a friend or a relative, someone that you feel comfortable with and that you've dealt with or someone else has dealt with in your family or friendship associates. Pleased with the work that the agent did for them and they would recommend them to you. We're going to proceed with assumptions that you have a good realtor. Someone who's familiar with your area, your neighborhood, has sold in there or listed in there in the recent past and is comfortable talking to you about your particular property and where it's located. One of the important things that's going to happen here in the coming future is we're going to all find ourselves using buyer's agreements, much the same way as we use a listing agreement. I'm surprised it has not happened. There are 2 states in the Union of the 50, I believe it's Connecticut and Washington State, that mandate the use of a buyer's agreement, which creates a relationship between the buyer and his client or her client. Just like the seller finds out in that listing agreement what his responsibilities are to the agent and what the agent's and his brokerage's responsibilities are to that seller, the same should be true for the buyer as well. So the buyer should know what responsibilities the agent that he has or she has chosen, what their responsibilities are. What are they expected to do for you, the buyer? And more importantly, maybe, it's what are you expected to do with regard to the agent? The key word in that relationship between the agent and his client, the buyer, should be the word loyalty. Both agent and client should be loyal to one another. That means that the buyer should not be running off, oh gee, I think I'll call this number on the sign in front of this house and see what that agent has to do. Maybe I'll get a break on the price because he'll represent me and the seller. Number one is that's very unlikely to happen. The listing agreement has a price tag that's placed in writing. So the agreement says that the agent or the agent's office, the brokerage's office, is going to receive X dollars for the sale of the seller's property. You're not going to get any special bargain. In fact, some agents do, like myself, frankly, do not practice dual agency. By that I mean they don't represent both the buyer and the seller. If I, for example, have an open house and I find a client who comes into that open house and wants to buy it and wants me to, deliver a contract to the seller, I will usually almost always hand that client off to another agent in my office so that they can get a non-conflicting representation. And more importantly, my seller feels much more comfortable that I'm representing the seller only and not the buyer as well. So these are kind of important. And the buyer's agreement is important because in today's marketplace, commissions are being addressed in the courts, etc., and some offices are not offering any commission at all, any co-op commission to the buyer's agent's brokerage. And so that agent shouldn't be expected to bring an offer in on a property that is not going to compensate him in any way whatsoever. So in the buyer's agreement, just like in the listing agreement, the agent states what his or her expected compensation is for the successful purchase of a bona fide property that is on the market in whatever area you're looking at. Sometimes that's a percentage, sometimes it's a dollar amount, sometimes it's even a by the hour amount. So you can imagine the buyer's agent either takes the buyer to the properties that they have scheduled for for showings and viewings, or he or she meets the buyer there and takes them through the property, shows them the pros and the cons of this particular property, takes them outside, gives them a notion of what value that particular location is. Is it on a pond? Is it on a golf course? Is it on the lake? Whatever the case might be, his profession or her professional opinions are kind of valuable to that buyer. If they're in on a waterfront property, then it's very important to determine what the floodplains are in that area. Also to determine whether or not the seller has flood insurance. If that seller has flood insurance, the new buyer, whoever it may be, is going to have that flood insurance as well. So it's always good to have that professional on your side, knowing what the issues are that may come up down the road. There are two things. Once we discuss or finalize the buyer's agreement, and everybody is going to be loyal to each one another, and we know what the expectations are from the buyer's agent in terms of what compensation he or she expects to get at the end of this transaction. Usually that's going to be just what the brokerage, the seller's brokerage, has determined. A percentage of the net sale price, for example. That is rather typical, but it's not absolute. So let's say that your buyer's agreement says that the buyer's agent expects no less than 2.5% of the net sales price of the house. Now, if the seller's brokerage is only offering $500 or 1%, then it is going to be understood by the buyer and by the buyer's agent that the compensation, the compensation that spans that 1% to the 2.5% will fall on the buyer themselves, or negotiated with the seller and the seller's agent to increase the percentage, or any combination of dollars and cents, percentages, etc. So that's the key in terms of what that buyer's agreement is there for. It protects the buyer, and it protects, maybe more importantly in this instance, it protects the buyer's agent and his brokerage as well. What are the buyer's agent's responsibilities? One of the very first things that the buyer's agent will probably request and require is a proof of buying power. So they're going to ask you and maybe direct you to a lending mortgage company that will examine their buying power by checking what their debt to income ratio is, how much credit card debt, is there a car payments, etc., etc. All of those things will be discussed between the lender and the lender's agent and the buyer, so that a sound number can be arrived at, and the lender will take into consideration what are the taxes on any particular property in that area. Is there an HOA? Is there a homeowners association that has a monthly or semi-annual or annual homeowners association fee? If you're buying a multiple family, for example, a townhome or a condominium, any attached property, they may have a condo association payment, a monthly payment that they expect that will be coming from the owner. Now, if the buyer is buying this house, he will have disclosed to him what that homeowners association fee is, what the taxes are, and then when he brings it to his lender, or she brings it to her lender, the lender will look at that and say, okay, given that this is the outlay every month for your taxes, for your insurance, for your homeowners association, etc., your buying power is X number of dollars. So don't be looking too high above that buying power. So the key in that first, very early on in the relationship between the buyer's agent and the buyer, there will be a connection made. There must be a connection made between the buyer and a mortgage lender. Whether it's somebody that the agent recommends, or it's somebody that the buyer knows, or the buyer's used a bank in the past, whatever the case may be, that will suffice, as long as we have a pre-approval letter, a pre-qualification letter, so that when we go in with an offer on any given property, we will accompany it with the proof that this buyer is bona fide and is in a position with a lender to provide the funds necessary to make the purchase. Buyer will be a buyer's attorney. In our state, in Illinois, almost all real estate transactions are handled between two real estate attorneys, and that's key. The word real estate attorney, not a litigator, not a ambulance chaser. None of those people will suffice. We have to have someone who is conversant with the concept of purchasing land or property. This is key to any real estate transaction. So you've got to have a lender, you've got to have a buyer's attorney, and you've got to have an agent. The agent also needs to know from the buyer, from you the buyer, they need to know what, and the lender will help in this, what is your price range, number one. Number two, what are your requirements? You can have a wish list and a must-have list, okay? You must have 3 bedrooms. You would like 4. You must have at least 2 baths. You'd wish for 2.5 or 3. You'd like a finished basement, but it's not necessary. You do need a garage, and you need a 2-car garage, because you have 2 cars and you live in the Chicagoland area. And anybody who lives here knows how much a warm car in a garage is appreciated around December through March or January through April, whatever the case may be, depending on where you're living at.